Hey guys, welcome to the final presentation for the project that Kevin and I have been working on in the past few weeks. As you might remember, we were working on a sci-fi Egyptian temple, and at first we built our concepts on images that we found about Egypt, somewhere a bit more mystical, somewhere a bit more sci-fi, and we definitely wanted to combine the ancient Egyptian culture with some kind of sci-fi elements, and we also wanted to have a focus in the middle of the room, which is in our case Anubis, an Egyptian god, and we also made some sketches. As you can see, we wanted to go for a circular room, and we also wanted some kind of change happen in the room. And at first you see the place that is trashed by teenagers a little bit, as it happens with places over time, or so it seems. And afterwards you sort of see the real party in the room.
Concerning the organization of our project, we used a Miro board, and it was really quite helpful from the beginning to the end, because usually with tools like that, you tend to use them in the very beginning and then never open them again, but we used it until the very end, and it helped us staying organized. For the asset list, we are quite happy that we managed to model actually everything that we planned initially. We added some things later, obviously, and did some stuff that we throw out, like the staircase, which was obsolete in the end. As you can see here, these are basically all the assets we modeled and that we used. We rescaled some of them, reused them a lot, and on top of that, we also used some primitives from Unreal itself, but Clarissa will tell you more about that in the lighting part. After our feedback session with Cecile and Vadim, we tried to keep our sound list visually a little bit more organized, that you immediately see like which sound refers to which source and stuff. And before we only used sounds from YouTube and Freesound, but then Vadim hooked us up with some keys for SoundSnap, and we were really happy to use SoundSnap in the end for some sounds that we wouldn't have found that easy. Speaking of sound, here's a little visualization of the sound modifications we did. For example, for the footsteps, we had like 10 different sounds which got triggered randomly. For the beer bottles that you will see later laying on the ground, they all have like 3 different glass on stone sounds which get triggered randomly. And they also have like every beer bottle has its own little trigger box and basic physics on it, so you can kick them around and they make their sound wherever they go. Spatially, our level is divided into 2 rooms, like the little small room you start in the beginning, and the bigger room, the circular room. And on this one we put a reverb effect, and you will notice this on the footsteps, on the sound of the music, and yeah, everything else.
Alright, let's talk textures. At first, we created a simple stone pattern that we could slap onto objects in general so that we could get a feeling for what the room might look like. Then we made some hieroglyph patterns that we could reuse and paint over other textures. For the first tries, we used photos from the internet and then just edited them to use them. And then later on, we created a proper pattern by hand that then would be used on the walls inside of the engine, but more on that later. And we also created some textures for the room. Those were mostly made with materials and substance, painter, and hand-painted dents and changes in the stone. On top of that, we also created some graffitis that we could then also slap onto other textures and build some layers there. As for the hieroglyphs on the walls, we used vertex painting, which is basically we had the texture underneath, the basic texture of the object, and then we put inside of the material editor, we added a bunch of nodes, and basically we have 2 corresponding textures. We have the basic room texture and then the hieroglyphic texture on top, and basically with the nice little brush tool you can then paint over it. As for the graffitis, we actually used something called decals, which is a pretty nice thing inside of Unreal. The way it works is basically you have this decal, you can move it around any way you want, and it wraps around the nearby objects and basically notices even curvatures over here. The only issue we had with it was that they don't really recognize PNGs, and so we kind of had to figure out what Unreal sort of recognizes and how we have to combine them and make them sort of work.
Right here are some impressions of the finished Anubis. I sculpted in ZBrush. I used Z Modeler for the hard surface mask. I always wanted to try Z Modeler, so it was my first time. Yeah, overall it turned out quite okay. The UVs are pretty shit. For the hard surface stuff, I did it the normal way, like in Maya, but the scarf and the body, I just cut it open. Did the remesher. Since he's not moving and just a statue, I just left it that way, quick and dirty, but good enough for this scene, I guess.
The lighting in the room is mostly based on point lights, which happen to be in the middle of the room mostly. One of them is actually highlighting the boombox, so it is elongated a little bit into the z-axis. Lighting in the center of the room is rather warm. We also put a fog inside of the scene so that some lights are better visible. Without a fog, sometimes you cannot really see light that well, but when you have fog inside, you can sort of see like small light beams, which is pretty nice. And also on the sides of the walls, we have some emissive materials, and also the ground is also emissive, and that actually sheds light in the scene as well, quite a lot actually, as well as some lasers, which are also basically primitives equipped with an emissive material, grouped together and then animated with an animation sequence in Unreal. Basically have a combined number of 5 laser groups, which are animated in different ways so that there's some kind of offset in their movement. As soon as you get to the top, they activate.
Now we have time for only 1 minute of commented gameplay. So enjoy. So, postmortem, the pros, we're super happy with the result we achieved in the end. We learned a ton about Unreal Engine and its tools. We used tools we never used before. The communication between Clarissa and me was really good. We mainly used WhatsApp and Discord for calls while we were working together. As I said in the beginning, we used Miro a lot, which helped us stay organized. We use Google Drive for sending data back and forth, and yeah, Pinterest in the beginning for idea finding and stuff, inspiration. Thanks to Vadim, we used SoundSnap, which was really helpful, and we used GitHub to send the scene back and forth all the time. The cons, I would say, like, we had some issues here and there with animations, but I mean, in the end, a lot of stuff worked better than maybe expected in the beginning. We had a very slow start, admittedly, and yeah, my laptop sucked. Holy. Unreal Engine is itself already quite computational heavy, and my laptop just couldn't handle it. So, in the end, when we had a lot of lights and some particles for the fire, Clarissa's hardcore gaming laptop had to handle all that. So that's it for now, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next week. Yeah?